Sveiki susirinkę, sveiki prisijungę. Mano vardas Paulius Ambrazevičius ir aš labai džiaugiuosi šiandieną sveikinamasi su jumis iš savo darbo kambario Vilniuje, Naujamiesčio rajone, jeigu kam įdomu tiksliau. Šiandieną mes šiek tiek pakeliausim ir pakeliausim ne tik po pasaulį, bet pakeliausim ir po istoriją, kadangi labai džiaugiuosi galėdamas šiandieną pristatyti knygą, dėl kurios čia ir susirinkome. Knyga yra pavadinimu Išnykusių šalių žemėlapis, neįtikėtinos istorijos apie šalis, kurių neberasime šiandienos žemėlapiuose. Čia yra jos lietuviškas leidimas, ji versta yra iš anglų kalbos ir labai džiaugiuosi, kad šiandieną mūsų pokalbėje dalyvauja knygos autorius, su mumis pasijungęs tiesioginiu satelitiniu ryšiu tiesiai iš Londono. Jeigu neklystu, bet apie tai dar pakalbėsim. Su mumis šiandieną knygos autorius Gideonas Defoe. So, Gideon, nice to have you here. How's been the weather in wherever you are? Are you in London at the moment?
I'm actually in sort of Oxfordshire at the moment, and the weather has been lousy, which is kind of annoying because that's all we've got is the weather, walks in the weather. So it would have been nice if, like, during lockdown we could have had, just an hour of sun. That's all I would have, asked for, but we didn't even get that. So yes, obviously I have no idea what you just said because my Lithuanian is not great. So I have no idea if you were just being nice or horrible about the book, or
I was just bashing the book and it's saying this is a waste of paper. No,
this man think he is.
But you didn't understand, so it shouldn't be hurtful to you.
No, it's fine. Yeah, that's
so. Yeah, it's nice to have you here. So this is your first book in Lithuanian, translated into Lithuanian as far as I reckon. So I want to go a little bit over your background. So what is it? What's your, as far as I've did my research, you are a graduate of Oxford University, and you have made your name while writing kind of silly books about pirates. Is that true?
That's pretty much sums it up. Yeah, I mean, I kind of, I studied archaeology and anthropology at university, which if you don't actually want to be an archaeologist, which kind of, I just got, there's only so much sitting in dirt holes for weeks on end that you can really stand. So it doesn't really lead to a lot of, obvious careers. So yeah, I kind of went from that to working in bars and not really knowing what I was doing with my life. And then I wrote a book to sort of try and impress a girl that I quite liked at the time, and it didn't really work. But it did get some friends sort of gave it to their friends, and then sort of photocopies of it, because it was just, it was literally just it was a joke. It wasn't meant to be a serious book. Or even really a real book at all. But it wound up getting kind of accidentally published. And then, even though it wasn't a kid's book, sort of people mistook it for a kid's book because it's kind of it's about pirates. And that seems a fair mistake to make, really. And because adults don't tend to read books about pirates.
Let's talk about this book then. Have you seen the Lithuanian edition yet?
I've been sent a cover. I've not seen. This is the first time I've seen it kind of like in the flesh. It looks really lovely, actually.
Yeah, it is. It is a very nice nice drawings, etc. etc. So it looks pretty good and very interesting. So I have this theory, but it's just my theory about you, which kind of sounds kind of weird. Were you one of those children who let their imagination run wild? Because at some point reading this book, I kind of felt that you might have been one of those like adventurers who went to and established their own countries with their own governing system and money and anthems, etc.
Yeah, I mean, I was a weird, I'm an only child and thing, and I think like a lot of only children, yes, you spend a lot of time kind of in your own head doing all that, and so yeah, kind of I like as a kid, I was really into, yeah, designing little flags, and I was always a bit of a map nerd. I enjoyed sort of like old maps and old globes and things like that. Yeah, I mean, it's sort of which I think is fine as a kid. I mean, the thing in researching this book is realizing that a lot of actual countries are partially set up because that's also the element that people enjoy. An awful lot of these things start because people kind of go, let's design a flag, let's come up with an anthem. And, that's sort of bit people get excited about, which is maybe not the sort of aspects they should be concentrating on when you're trying to set up a place. But it is the fun bit, so you can't really blame them. Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of, it was always, I was a weird kid, and then probably became a weird adult, and so it's sort of as an adult I've kind of like got weird hobbies, like kind of I collect old banknotes, which is, I don't recommend it. It's a bit of a joyless hobby. It's not it's not quite as bad as stamp collecting, but it's kind of it's up there. But you find these from places like Sarawak and Katanga, these other things, and you're kind of like, I don't know where these are. Where is it? So that sort of, led me down. And just over the years, I sort of, collected these little sort of factoids and stories and stuff, which at some point, I approached my agent and said, is there possibly a book in this? And I think, I'm quite a lazy writer, so my agent was just happy for me to be suggesting anything, to be honest. So then I thought, right, I'll do this, but was kind of with that sort of very amateur, like I say, it was anecdotal stuff I had picked up over the years, and then when it came to doing kind of like the sort of the actual research, realizing that it was all a much more complicated, messier sort of concept than I'd anticipated. And I spent a lot of time at the start thinking, right, well, I've got to nail down, if I'm going to write a book about extinct countries, I need to define what a country is, and what is a nation state. And spent a long time getting absolutely nowhere, because it turns out there really is no sort of simple set definition that anybody can agree on with these things. So it's I got quite bogged down at the start of the research, trying to set these parameters, and then sort of kind of came full circle and was like, I actually, I'm not sure I care completely about arriving at a really good set academic definition. So I'm going to go back to, the stuff that is the stories that interest me and the things that seem interesting, and not worry quite so much about, the sort of, does this make the UN's list of officially recognised states? Because like I say, no one can agree. Nobody can agree on it.
So yeah, actually, that would have been my next question. Like, how did this book come to be? But it was basically the question and idea of kind of your agent. It was the
I went to my agent with the idea, and she was just, like I say, she was just very happy to sort of that I'd had any idea at all. And it was kind of, initially it was going to be a much more of a sort of some glossy pictures of some maps with a very small little bit of text about each one, and then just because I'm not very good at working to my own brief, I sort of accidentally just got really into it and over researched and overwrote, and so I ended up writing a kind of proper book, and so actually the initial publishers were like, kind of like, this isn't what we what it is. So I actually ended up kind of moving to someone that was kind of happy to actually recognize it as a book rather than a sort of illustrated thing with a couple of words added. So, it's that weird thing where you start a project and you think it's going to be one thing, and then the kind of project itself dictates the way it's going to go, and you never quite know where it's going to end up. And this was very much one of those. It's not what I thought I was writing at the start.
But, well, in my opinion, it ended up well. So, well done. So, you started talking a little bit, you talked a little bit about the research for this book. So how did it look like? When you started writing the book? Was it the lockdown already, or was it previously? So
no, luckily this was prior to lockdown, actually. So, I was still able to, I could go and camp out at the British Library for a few months, and I don't know how in the kind of current sort of world you'd really, it would be very difficult, because especially something like this where you've really got to hop all over the place. Because nobody is and I'm saying, historians, proper historians tend to, have very narrow fields of focus. And, I've got a friend who's a historian who's kind of specifically sort of types of rope from Victorian England. It's really narrow, the stuff that they concentrate on. And so it's kind of, when you're writing about something like this, and it's all over the shop, it makes it quite a tough research, because there's a lot of sort of, serendipity involved, and you need a decent reference library where you can sort of browse and go from bit to bit and make connections that you didn't necessarily expect. So it's it was, again, a slightly my research was haphazard, I guess, is probably how you describe it. Probably not how proper serious academic would go about it, but university is a long time ago, so I've forgotten how to do serious academic research. It was the bit I really enjoyed. I think it was getting lost down weird little rabbit holes.
I'm not. This is not my I'm not making this up. As a kind of a professional archaeologist, have you thought about doing something like a field expeditions to some of the countries and just take a look around what it?
I'm really not a professional archaeologist. I have an archaeology degree, but absolutely does not make me a professional. Again, with this book, because one of the sort of rules I decided to set myself, just to try and limit the, because it's such a big topic, places that used to exist. So, when you're talking about countries, there's a big argument to say, well, you're talking about anything prior to whatever the Treaty of Westphalia in 16, whatever it was, is sort of a nonsense, because that's when the whole concept of the nation state really arises. So I was like, right, well, I'm not going to really do any kind of prehistory stuff where, archaeology might have come in useful, because it's just, you're more talking about dynasties, really. You're not talking about specific kind of shapes on the map that you can point to a firm border, which I then kind of, like I say, when I wrote the book, I then ignored my own rules, and I include the Kingdom of Axum down in what's now Ethiopia, which and the Golden Kingdom of Silla in Korea, which again they're prehistory, and it's just based on archaeological evidence. So like I say, having set my rules, I then totally forgot about them and ignored them. But there's not many in there where my archaeology degree would have come in particularly useful, because you are talking basically about the sort of 19th and 20th centuries mainly, where yes, you don't need to dig stuff up too much. So
I'm also very interested about the selection process of which countries to put in the book and which to omit. So how did this work? How did you start it, like with a I don't know, did you went on Google and extinct countries and then saw
I had a massive spreadsheet that I'd sort of created, and it was, and basically I just went with the ones that, you know, I thought there was an interesting story there, because and a lot of them have, you know, very similar overlapping reasons for existing. So you kind of, I put aside a lot of that. It's also, it's a, you know, the tone of the book is, you know, it has some serious points to make, but it's a fairly light-hearted sort of type of history. And some of them are, you know, I mean, a place like Biafra, where, you know, I struggled to find a kind of anything light-hearted to say about Biafra at all. And, you know, it's all a bit too bleak, which, you know, but again, having said that, ignored my own sort of advice, and I do cover like the Congo Free State, which was the horrific kind of slave state set up by Leopold II of Belgium, where again, not a lot of laughs involved there. It's all, you know, incredibly grim. So but for some reason it kind of, you know, I felt it, you know, it fitted, and there was an interesting point to be made there, and it's so yeah, I kind of basically the selection process was yeah, do I find this interesting and or funny, and that decided what got in there. Yeah, so I wasn't trying to be a kind of, you know, it is not an attempt to be a comprehensive sort of thing, and I do get kind of now slightly angry emails sometimes addressed to me saying kind of like, you forgot to include such and such. It's like, I forgot to include a lot of places, you know. It's sort of, it's like I didn't forget to do, but you know, I'm not writing a 10,000 page book about, you know, everywhere that has ever kind of possibly been considered a country. So yes, it is not comprehensive, but it is hopefully entertaining. I guess that's the aim.
Well, it is, and I think as a former citizen of one extinct country, I was pretty interested in is the fact that there's nothing fun about Soviet Union, was the fact that you didn't put it in this book?
No, I mean, I actually did. I started writing the Soviet Union entry, and it's kind of, it's very tricky because, you know, these are quite short little potted histories, and normally you want something where there's a clear little story to be told, and something like the Soviet Union, you know, how do you begin to find the angle to boil that down to 500 words or something? I mean, it's a really sort of thing, and also it's one where you know, there's a lot of, you know, I think most people are aware of the Soviet Union. There's not many people you're going to bump into kind of going, oh, I've never heard of this place. That sounds interesting. Tell me more. So I was trying to recover the kind of the slightly more obscure stuff. You know, hopefully a lot of it is kind of, you know, you might not recognize these names. They might be kind of new to you, and, you know, hopefully it might make people kind of go and try and find a bit more out about those places. But no, it was not from some kind of, you know, anti-Soviet Union sort of sense exactly. It was just sort of, I couldn't quite find the route in to do something that would fit into the book without just seeming incredibly glib, I guess.
Yeah, well, that totally makes sense. So, you've read a lot about these countries. Some of those, even, I think they're kind of more of a legendary, in the sense that you're not sure that they existed, but they're also,
I mean, yeah, certainly in terms of, again, it's that thing where, because there is no set definition and there's no real, you know, does something have to have a legal basis in international law or something like that? And so, you know, there's a lot where it's you've got to go on the word of the the people involved and things. There's things like the Great Republic of Rough and Ready, which is a little mining town in California that objected to a mining tax, and also was angry about a court case that a statewide judge had sort of presided over. So they declared themselves independent, supposedly, and then voted themselves back into the union once they realised they couldn't buy beer anymore because their neighbours wouldn't sell them, and they said, "Well, we don't sell to foreigners, and also why are you trying to celebrate the 4th of July because you're not American anymore?" So there's a place like that where it's the people of the town will swear blind that this is entirely legit and this happened, and they had their constitution, they declared independence, they were a little republic, but you won't find proper solid evidence in the archives for it, and it's our question as to, well, does that matter? If the locals kind of believed it and they claim that the paperwork's just got lost. It's a nice story. So there are certainly there are a few where it's not exactly mythological. I mean, some of them are outright, lies. That is true. But certainly kind of dubious historical record. Some of them, let's put it politely.
So if we take all the 48, if I'm not mistaken, all the 48 countries that are on this book, were there any of those that you would, when you were reading about them or writing about them, you were thinking, well, I wish I'd been there at like the heyday of this country or so? Were there any?
Yeah, I mean, there's, my sympathy sort of lies with the micronations, the ones that are really sort of, never had a hope, but were kind of plucky upstarts. And somewhere like I really like Neutral Moorsnet, which was a bit after its 18, around about 1818, and Napoleon has sort of smashed Europe to bits, and it's all being kind of put together at a conference, and they have these big international conferences, and they're always redrawing maps and stuff, and Prussia and the Netherlands at the time were drawing a little border, and they were kind of like, well, there's this zinc mine, and we quite want the zinc mine, and they're going, oh, well, we quite want it too, and they can't agree with it, and so eventually they say, look, let nobody have it, it's fine, it's just, it won't be either of ours. And so you get this kind of, a state is formed simply because people can't agree who owns it, and nobody asks the citizens, the people that live there. Nobody goes up to them. So it's kind of like, well, so do you mind the fact that you now you're neither this nor that? You're suddenly this new place. But they really sort of made an effort to run with it, and the zinc ran out, which was kind of inevitable, and they suddenly thought, right, okay, well, we haven't got an economy anymore, what do we do? And they just had all these schemes to try and kind of keep their little country going, and they'd set up all these gin distilleries, and they had kind of more gin distilleries than they had houses, sort of thing, which would have made it an interesting place to live, and they're trying to do this, and then they set up some gambling places because the neighbours, Germany and Russia and Germany and Belgium, basically kind of saying like, no gambling. So they like spy a bit of an opportunity there and go, all right, okay, we'll get people to come to our casinos, and then the Kaiser gets annoyed by that and thinks it's all a bit debauched, so he sort of throws a switch and cuts off their electricity, and then they try and sell stamps to collectors, which obviously if it'd been banknotes, that'd have been very into that, but it's stamps, and so that's not quite enough to really, hang an entire economy on. And then eventually they decide they're going to become the world's first Esperanto-speaking state, which I have no idea why they thought that was a good business sort of model. That, I think they thought it would make them a tourist draw, and people would flock all over to come and see the people that speak Esperanto. And eventually there's another war. It all gets reabsorbed into Belgium or whatever. But I kind of, I would have liked to have been in one of these places, these weird in between states. That and also, I mean, another a similar example is from Lithuania with Paloja, which is this little village that in the aftermath of World War One, and the Russian Empire's collapsing into, the Bolsheviks are taking over and everything, and you've got a lot of places sort of popping up and into existence and then popping back out again. But the League of Nations is getting going and redrawing all the maps, and this little village is, regards itself as very much Lithuanian, wants to be part of, the new Lithuanian Republic, and the map gets drawn, and basically most of the village is in Poland, and they're like, well, we're not having this. And again, legend has it that they sent an envoy to the League of Nations and said, excuse me, we want to be part of this, and just got kind of batted away, which very possible. I mean, I'm not sure kind of like how the League of Nations sort of complaint system worked, and how that would have, ever been set up. But anyway, so they had a big meeting in the town and said, right, we're going to, set up our own place, and we've already got our flag, which is the bison, and we're going to, start our own currency, and again, sort of, each one of these things where you're really on their side. You really want them to make it. At the same time, it's a total farce, because it's such a confusing time in history where you've got all these sort of armies and forces moving through areas, and nobody quite knows in post-war Europe, what is where, what's up for grabs, and they end up sort of this little village of the army that they've kind of raised. Has a skirmish with what they think is Polish brigade of Polish soldiers. Turns out to be the Lithuanian either other people that they want to be part of, and they're all kind of like, eventually just get to a point where like, this is so confusing and such. Let's just we're just going to sit back and sort of let historical events unfold. So it kind of disappears. And it's another one where it's kind of like, is it legit to really call it a republic? I mean, again, the sort of there are old guys in that village who is, I mean, there's a journalist called Anne Applebaum who visited them a little while back, and they all kind of their local historian swore blind to all this. Again, kind of finding the paper trail for it is trickier, but I'm happy to believe them. So I regard Paloja, the Republic of Paloja, as it's a genuine thing. So yeah, those little ones there, that's where I'd like to have been, I think. The tiny micronation places.
Well, and funny you mentioned Esperanto and then Perloja, because the inventor of Esperanto, Ludwig Zamenhof, he spent some time not too far from the current place where Perloja was. So he was like,
I've learned something new. I mean, that was the weird bit of researching this, was these weird little links that you kind of, I was writing about Bavaria with Mad King Ludwig, and who is sort of bankrupting the place by building all these opera houses for Wagner, who he's like a massive fan of, and everything. And in writing about Bavaria, I covered the Ludwig prior to that, Ludwig, who had had an affair with Lola Montez, who is the famous, supposedly Andalusian, but not actually Andalusian, who, had danced her way across Europe, had affairs with everybody, like, Franz Liszt, people like that. And then when I'm writing about the Republic of Rough and Ready in California, it turns out that in the village next door where they're trying to buy the beer from, Lola Montez is living there. She's wound up there years later and sort of does these dances for the local miners where they all throw gold nuggets at her. And it's kind of like, very odd little links. But that was one I didn't know about, the Ploya and Esperanto bit. So I shall...
well, but just more of like a territorial...
Yeah.
Not that it doesn't have any correlation, even, I think.
Well, no, but I just find those really interesting. Those kind of like odd little bits where it all fits together.
Yeah. And another thing, well, if we're still staying in Lithuania, there's this. I don't know if you saw this on your research or somewhere. It was the so-called Paulavos Respublika, the Paulava Republic, in 18th century. From 1769 to 1795 until the third partition of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. And so it was just I'd say more than 1,000 hectares, maybe 1.5, something like that. 800 people lived there, and it was just a rich guy abolished serfdom in that area. His name was Pavel Ksaver Brzostovsky, I think, and in those like 25 years, the Paulava Republic was really like very successful financially and economically, because the people were not kind of working as a normal I wouldn't say capitalist society, but they were like working for themselves. So, and there are these ruins not too far from Vilnius, actually.
I bet you can because you can still visit there, can't you?
So when I was reading about Perlo, it kind of reminded me about Paulavos Respublika.
Yeah, no, I mean there's a lot of, I know that again, I know from my weird banknote fixation, there's Memel, which on the Lithuanian German bit, it was from when would this have been, sort of 1920s, because and you get these nice little banknotes from that with its own little self-proclaimed well, again, not really self-proclaimed, that one was more of a another one of these, right, we're doing a treaty, we're redrawing maps, this has sort of become its own little thing. But yes, you get so many. I mean, it's a confusing part of the world with respect to where you live. It kind of like it's really keeping track of some of it is it will make you scratch your head.
There's this thing that if you were born, let's say, in Vilnius, the current capital of Lithuania, in 1917. So if you lived up until 1992, or well, let's say 1991, when we got the wider recognition, even though you haven't moved, I don't know, from your flat or from your house, you would have still lived in at least 5 different countries.
Yes, I mean, well, there's Ruthenia in what is now part of Ukraine, and which managed to I think have 3 different in the space of a day. They started off in the morning. They're part of Czechoslovakia or Bohemia, Moravia, whatever it is back then, and then get invaded by the Germans. Invade that. They're like, oh, we don't want to be kind of hooked up with the Nazis. Okay, we'll become our own little independent state. And then Hungary invades that evening, sort of thing. So there's the supposed, probably apocryphal, but nice how of the guy kind of running out and putting a new nameplate on his door in the various different languages depending on who is running the place at that moment. And just I like the sort of the tired resignedness of kind of like, oh, it's going to be someone else by tomorrow, and which is why the whole concept of nations and countries and everything, they are inherently fairly stupid, and I think people taking any of them too seriously is a big part of what's wrong with the world, really. I'm not a massive fan of rampant nationalism. It's. I guess I like how many of these stories sort of highlight the inherent ridiculousness of it all.
Are there any plans for a sequel or something like that?
I mean, there's kind of like there's certainly enough places that I've not covered. And like I say, if you expand it out to kind of really include sort of more further back in history places and empires, etc., then you could do another 5 books. I'm not sure if kind of it's I don't think I'd be ready to go back in yet, sort of, to do it, but depending how many copies it sold as well. I mean, I'm not sure. It's like I think it's got to do pretty well to warrant a sequel. It's I think I'd probably find some other angle to I do like these things where you can find some aspect that allows you to kind of do a bit of virtual globe trotting, even if especially in the current world of lockdown, etc., where actually going anywhere seems a really remote possibility. It'd be quite nice to just go to places in the form of research, even if it's just sort of like I'll do a book about, I don't know, cheeses from around the world and just eat a lot of cheese from various places, and find what they.
Sounds like a great plan. It's like do what you love and you won't have to work a day.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't sound like a really healthy plan, just eating all the cheese from around the world, but I'll cross that bridge when I come to it.
So when you were writing this book, or maybe let's say more of researching for this book, did you ever thought like in, let's say, I don't know, 50 or 100 years, will there be some extinct countries out of these that we currently have, like this 190 something officially in the United Nations?
I think your time scale's way off. I mean, I'd be surprised if 10 years from now, if it's the same sort of I can't remember what's the last South Sudan, is that the last one
to enter United Nations or so? I think it was South Sudan.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously you get named Macedonia becoming North Macedonia, and stuff. But it's I mean, things, and some of the extinct ones from book, like I may well come back again, in terms of I don't think kind of people have such a that how we choose to classify ourselves and everything, it changes so much. And again, it does change on I make the point in the introduction of the book, if you're playing football, it's like we're England if we're playing football, we're the UK if we're doing this, if we're in the Eurovision, which so you have all these different sort of definitions. So nothing is fixed, and I think that I would be. It wouldn't be that I would be surprised if some of the countries that exist now are extinct in 100 years. It's more like I would be very shocked if they're not. If everything is. I don't think we've reached some point of stability. I mean, the United Kingdom, there is a good chance that within a few years might not be the United Kingdom, because Scotland may well go off and do its own thing, and it's everything is a constant state of flux, basically. And unless you're Portugal never seems to. That's the only one that sort of like, I think the borders of Portugal have just been the same forever, and it's just but 100 years time, Portugal will still be Portugal. The rest of us, who knows? no idea.
And they have the oldest still operating navy in the world since like 1180 or something like that. So maybe that helps as well. So as we're nearing towards the end, so this is your first book in Lithuania. What do you expect the reader for your book look like? Who are those people who are buying these books of yours?
I don't know. I mean, because I'm just not sort of. There are, probably the sensible way to write a book is to, really target your audience first, like in a sort of the way advertisers do, and know your demographic that you're going to appeal to. And I'm not very good at that. I write the stuff that interests me, and I kind of hope that it might interest other people. I have no real idea whether those people are sort of 12 or 82. I'm not sure. I guess people that probably people that are not looking for a extremely dry academic text, I suppose. I think if you want something that's really going to be a bit of serious academia, this is probably not the review, but just I don't know. Wish I did.
But also, this is if you want something more, it's just a great place to start.
I think hopefully it is a sort of there's is a kind of an introduction to a thing, and I kind of again I make the point in it of you've got to be slightly wary of anything that tries to sum up the history of a place in 1,000 words or whatever. It's everything is more complicated than that. So if someone wants to kind of hopefully readers think, oh, I'm interested in this, but I'm going to read some more stuff about this, and they may well kind of go, well, he kind of fudged that sort of issue, and I'm not sure that it's like that's good. It's I'm very happy for people to sort of use it as a place to get into some slightly more serious stuff.
So thanks for this great chat. Thank you for your time, and hopefully at some point I will be able to get your autograph on this one, because now I just can't.
I would very much like to visit Lithuania. So I've never been to Lithuania. It's so
I could show you the Paulava Republic and Perloja, and
that would be good. I mean, but if we're ever allowed to get back on a plane again, take you up on it. So no, thank you very much for interviewing me. That's
thank you.
Fun. Thank you. Very fun to talk to another human being.
It is. I second the emotion. Cheers. Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you.